Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here today, or being here virtually. And I'm very excited to be here and talking about bringing content to your students' mobile devices. Someone asked at the beginning, like before we even started, whether this is really just for classroom use, and the idea here is definitely that you can take your content and make it available via the mobile device outside the classroom. So it doesn't have to be something that you're using inside the classroom. But as we go through this, you can certainly ask questions on that issue. Um, So we're going to be looking at the benefits of mobile-friendly content and then some tools for developing mobile content. And when we talk about using mobile phones, I think some folks want to know about apps, and certainly there's a lot of content out there that can be delivered through apps. I'm really concentrating on tools you can use to take things that you're already doing with your students and make them available. So the things we're looking at today are not so much in the area of apps. Or in sort of pre-created content. So it's not like having a textbook on your smartphone. In this case, it's more you as a teacher, and everything I say that you as a teacher can do, you also can turn around and have your help your students learn how to do it, and then they can do it too. So I always like to model what I show teachers they can do. Usually are things I think eventually you could turn around and have your students doing too. So first, just talking about what mobile-friendly content is, and I'm guessing most of you have smartphones, and we'll get to that in a moment. But when we ask what is mobile-friendly, what I want you to do right now is actually go to the LAC website, so that's lacnyc.org, on your smartphone, or if you have another type of tablet or some sort of mobile device in front of you, because I want to show you how different it can look on a small screen versus on a regular computer screen. So you're typing that in on your small device, whatever that is, your tablet or your phone. And then think about how it compares with what you'll see on the screen. And I'm going to show you the next slide here. This is what it looks like on my computer screen. So we created our website using something called Weebly, which automatically makes the design that you're creating most of the time is for a computer screen. It's a more horizontal layout, but then it will automatically change that and make it into something a little bit more vertical. So if you're looking at it on your phone or on a tablet, you're going to see something a bit like that. So this sort of long, thin, vertical content. What's nice about this is all the tabs will work, all the buttons will work. If there are question and answer sections, those will all be functional. So when we're talking about mobile content, it's important if you're sending your students to places on the web that you make sure in advance that is something that functions well on a small screen, because I didn't pull up an example here, but you've probably all hit those examples where you've looked for something on your phone and got to websites that actually, they're really just replicating what's on the big screen, but to actually use to tap on a tab or try to use the functionality of the websites are often, you lose some of that ability.
Can people,
Yeah.
pardon me, no, so could people raise their virtual hand if you were able to call up the LAC site on your smartphone? Okay, I see some people have. Good. All right. And we realize that maybe not everybody came prepared to do that, but it looks like people were able to get to it. Okay, good.
Right, so I appreciate that they're jumping on that. And notice also what it felt like to have to type in a website. So I don't know if some of you maybe just Googled it, some of you went ahead and typed the whole URL in there. And that's another thing to think about when you're sending your students places. So we'll talk a little bit about how to make that a little easier, because typing in a URL there's always a possibility of something going wrong.
Right.
So yeah, we need to work. We need to work to support that. So this is a question for you to answer in that question box. But what do you like to do with your mobile devices? What do you do on a daily basis? When you woke up this morning, did you turn to your smartphone and check for, what did you do? I'm not going to say.
Okay.
So if you could answer some things that you're doing with your smartphones or tablets.
Okay. Right, because people have screens of different sizes. So Renee says that she used it to research, or she likes to research information with her mobile device. Kathy likes to check news sites. I definitely check news sites almost constantly with my mobile phone. Captured some Pokemon Go characters. My,
Excellent.
my wife complains that that she's got a cell phone where it's only Wi-Fi. She doesn't want that much data,
Uh,
and so she always like, "Oh, I'm about to get this Pokemon, but the car's moving," and so slow down, slow down. Eileen likes to check the weather. Terry likes to check in with family, news, get some general information. Peggy does email. Dale does email research, stock quotes. Oh, okay. Kathy likes to do Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, email. Jane likes to check messages, check email, Facebook, listen to YouTube. Indeed, those are all fun things that people do all the time.
right. So you can see that I mean, you maybe already knew that, but that you are very willing to do some reading on your smartphone screen. Maybe you're watching some videos on your smartphone screen. I was just traveling and I used mine a lot for figuring out how to get from one place to another. So we're pretty used to using it in ways I think that maybe even a couple of years ago we wouldn't have been so happy to do. I think the reading on the screen, for example, is something that we do now on a daily basis, and I don't know that that was so true in the beginning. Um, so I wanted to ask you that question because I think it's important when we're thinking about the kinds of content that work best for a mobile device. And really, you covered a lot of it. I mean, it is around the reading and writing, um, watching videos, listening to sound files. No one said podcasts, but some of us maybe are listening to podcasts on our phones or through some sort of mobile device. Sounded like a lot of you were very happy to go to websites to read news content, and then some of you were using apps probably for some of the social media tools. I don't know if anyone said taking photos, and I have to say, I don't carry a camera anymore, and I take photos much more frequently. Now, I don't print any of them out. That's
Hmm.
the difference, certainly, but I certainly use it for capturing images. Um, and you have access to things like Google Drive and Dropbox, so there are ways to actually access bigger documents. Although I don't know that that's always the best thing to do, in the sense it's a small screen to spend a lot of time looking at things. But I think it's still something to know about that you could do that. And then certainly I think answering quizzes. I don't know if any of you, someone mentioned, I know using social media, things like Facebook, where often there are quizzes embedded in there, and answering a quiz that way seems really easy. And we'll talk about some tools today that make that very easy to do. And anything that's a survey can be a quiz, and anything that's a quiz could be a survey. So you can gather data for different purposes that way. And then obviously there are very specific apps. I'm just now playing chess with my nephew who's 8, who lives in Atlanta, and I live in New York. And it's been really hilarious to kind of get a little message saying he just moved his pawn somewhere, and he's beating me, I think. So very exciting. Um, so when I talk about technology in any sense, this is not just for mobile, but for any kind of discussion around digital literacy and technology. I think sometimes we get a little caught up in the difficulty being around accessing and knowing how to use the hardware, and also maybe accessing internet and data. And while those are really important and obviously are huge stumbling blocks for many people, and that's a real issue, once we kind of get that taken care of, we're really talking about how we're using information, and that's kind of, I think, the base of adult literacy in general. So when I think about using technology for accessing information, most of us are really happy consuming information, right? So the idea that maybe how many of you have ever watched a video on YouTube? When I ask that question in a room full of people, everyone raises their hand. At some point, they've watched some sort of video on YouTube. But when I ask how many of them have ever put a video up on YouTube, the number kind of goes down. And then there's even the part where you can curate, keeping the example of YouTube, where you can curate the videos that are there, either your own or videos that have been made by other people by creating playlists. And often that's almost on par with the create. So consume, we're really happy with. Create and curate are two areas that we might know that we can do it, but we haven't taken advantage of that as much. And I think those are the areas that for teaching, all three of these areas for teaching and for learning are really important, but consuming seems to be something people are already a little bit familiar with. So we will talk about consume today, but create and curate are sort of areas to think about. And the phone and tablets really give us a lot of we have a lot of power now. When I was teaching ESL, I had, you know, if I wanted to do video, I would have needed a bunch of video equipment, and now I feel like I could do a lot of that with my phone. So another way to think about digital literacy, and this is actually the definition that's included under WIOA, are the skills associated. Uh, and I like these verbs particularly, right? So we're talking about finding, evaluating, organizing, creating, and communicating information. And again, if we take out the word technology, I think in a lot of ways this is what we've been doing in adult literacy anyway, or in literacy in general, that we're talking about the ability to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information. So now we're including technology, the use of technology to do that. And it's not at the expense of those other things. So still read books and paper, but why not also have access to your news feeds on your phone and know where to go and know how to do it and know how to make it bigger if you need to, or click through links or whatever. So that was my little kind of what we're doing with mobile, and why technology. As far as tools are concerned, so if I'm kind of dividing these into buckets of the consume, create, and curate. So if we're talking about using mobile devices for consuming information, a common way I think that phones particularly are something people are really happy to use is, well, this is actually a question for you. So do you currently, even without using mobile phones, maybe you're doing this in a classroom setting, or this is something that you send home with people, their homework assignment is to go and access this kind of content, or you have a day in the lab when maybe you are lucky enough to have access to computers. Do you share links to online content with your students? Do you share your students' content online? Are they developing, writing, or anything like that that you're then posting online somewhere? Have you ever done something like a scavenger hunt or a web quest in instruction where students go onto the internet to search for certain kinds of information or complete a set of kind of hints or questions? So go ahead in the question area and say if you've done any of these things, or some things that you are currently doing around consuming information online.
And again, this could be either something that happens in class, or again, like homework, or that you're encouraging students to do outside of the classroom, on
Absolutely,
their
and not
own.
necessarily, and not expecting it right now to be mobile at all, but with the idea that you either, you know, yeah, inside classroom, outside classroom activity where they're accessing online content.
Okay, so Dawn says that she does in fact share links with her students. Um, so does Robert, about online content and particular online resources. Uh, Somebody are giving specific examples like freerice.com.
Oh, nice.
Lots of links, YouTube videos that are relative to what they're working on. Jane notes that they have a Facebook group, and I'm presuming that means for the class, and that they share links within that Facebook group. Thomas says that they have a laptop for each student, and he uses remind.com to provide assignments, right, so that they can access those assignments outside of the class. And then Kathy says students work in the computer lab, they work on Khan Academy and other learning sites. So they're definitely accessing and consuming content in a variety of ways, and sharing that content through sharing links and sharing ideas.
That's great, and that sounds like you guys are doing some really interesting things. And I guess I didn't ask the question, but one of the questions that around sharing links, I think, is how do you get your students to those places? Because one of the challenges I have often, I only see, we do a lot of workshops here at the Literacy Assistance Center, but at the time I'll only see that group of people for that class, for that workshop slot, and I won't necessarily have their email addresses. So for them to get to the links, I know some people can set that up in the lab so that they've created bookmarks, but so if you wouldn't mind very quickly saying how do you get folks to those links? Is that a website that you've created, or I heard the one about Facebook where they're sharing links on Facebook, but if you wanted your students to get to those links, how are you getting them there? Is it something that you've written down, something that they can click on? You're sending it via email? Just to get a sense of how you guys are doing that already.
Okay, and while you're doing that, I will point out that after the webinar is over, within a couple of days, I'll send you a certificate of attendance, but also a link to the, speaking of links, a link to the archived version of this. And since people are sharing ideas in the email where I'm sending you the certificate, I will include all the websites that people are saying and they're talking about. So I know we're going fast, and so you can hear about things like free rice or things like that. So we'll be able to
Thank you.
capture that and send that along to you. So, for example, Jane suggests the use of USA Learns and Duolingo, but your question about sites, so Jane also mentions bookmarks for the class. Um, Thomas offers grade points for students who access the link, and he maintains a teacher's account. Um, Kathy says that, let's see, it's broken up. Futures for ESL is on the computers already.
Okay.
And then Jane notes that sometimes they have trouble helping students to download apps for USA
Mm.
Learn. So even if you want to direct them to something like USA Learns, it may be hard for them to get it on their device or their computer.
Right, and that's something when I was teaching ESL, for example, we used Rosetta Stone, so we would have an opportunity to go to the lab and use Rosetta Stone, but then once the students left the classroom, or we weren't in the lab, or they had graduated from the class and were out in the world but would have liked to continue, they really couldn't access it. And so one of the things I like about mobile is this idea that a lot of these things now are available as apps, but even if they aren't, if they're browser-based, that you can get back to them. And the question is, how do you get there the first time, and how do you get back to them when you want to get to them? So I know some teachers, for example, will send emails to students, and I know some use things like Facebook or a website, or can have it pre-programmed onto a lab computer. But that's, again, the question then, when they leave your classroom or they're not in the lab, can they access that information? So this next piece is really to kind of look at that and think of some ways that we can help students get to those links without necessarily having to type them in manually. Oops, sorry. So when I do this face-to-face, I'm like, okay, I would like you to go to this video. And usually about 3 people start to type because they're really earnest and lovely people, but I'm like, this is crazy. If a teacher asked me to go to this website, I would be like, okay, that's not going to happen. So what do you do when you have a really long link like that you want to share with
You
students and
have
you
to
want
go to
them
the
to go
next
there?
slide. You need to go to the next slide, I think, to show that
Oh, is it
long
not
link.
showing? Did I
It's not
somehow?
showing. Yeah,
Oh
we're
dear, I
still
think I
at
might have.
we're still at the do
Did I
you.
Okay. I moved forward, but it didn't move forward with me.
Yeah,
Could I have?
your cursor is frozen. There we go.
Okay, I think I've
Okay.
hit the pause button somehow.
Okay.
Okay, so now you're seeing the really long link.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Good. So you should be, yes, horrified by this really long link and never want to type something like this in. So what do you do when you have a really long link that you want to share with your students, or with anybody, actually? And if you want to type those in.
Jane suggests send by email or send a message, right? So that then they'll only have to click on it, presumably. Renee
Beautiful.
mentions copy and pasting.
Nice.
Yep,
So
cut
again,
and
I
pasting.
delivered them somehow electronically, and then they could copy and paste
Right,
or click on it. Yeah.
right. Tiny
So
URL.
very nice. So
Okay.
I do tiny URL. I actually use Bitly uh, as another form of shortener. So that can be very helpful. So we took this really long link and now we made it into a short one. The downside so Bitly, like tinyurl or Google has a version of this too. So they take your long URL and make a short version that is something that takes you to that place instead of having to go to the long link. Bitly you can use without having an account. If you don't have an account, it will give you a shortened link, but you can't edit it. So the downside of that is this link here, if I asked you to type this in, it's not clear whether it's an I or that the first one's an I, but is the next one an L or a 1? Are those zeros or O's? So what I like to do with Bitly is I do have an account which allows me to customize it so I can change it into an actual set of words, which also I think helps students type it in. So if you're in a situation where you don't have the luxury of having this already bookmarked into the computer lab, or you can't send people emails or texts, and you want them to get somewhere on their phone. And this is particularly true for phones because you don't quite know how they're going to get there. It's not like you can pre-program their phones with a bunch of bookmarks or whatever. So having a website or something like that can be very helpful, or the person mentioned a Facebook group or something like that. But if we're in class and I just want you to get there right now, certainly the customized URL is something that the majority of people can type in. But you will find that even then, one or two people might not get that it's case sensitive. This is one of the issues with these shortened links, is that they are case sensitive. So if they don't capitalize the M's or something like that, they might not get there. And just having one or two people not get there easily means that everybody, it slows everything down. It can make people feel like they can't do it, and it can be a negative experience. So what I like to do at that point is I like to make a QR code. So again, if I was face-to-face with you right now, I'd ask you all how many of you have ever seen a QR code, and usually 100% of the people in the room will say that they have seen them. And then if I ask how many people have ever scanned a QR code, the number goes down. It can go down to like 0 or down to half at least. And QR codes have been used in marketing in a way that I think has not been useful, and I don't go around scanning QR codes everywhere I see them, but I think in education, and especially in this kind of situation where you want to get everyone to the same place at the same time, QR code can be really a useful tool. So we're going to look at QR codes a little bit here. So QR stands for quick response, and they've been around since the 90s, but they were used mostly in industry until smartphones were more, prevalent, because they require something to scan them, and we weren't all walking around with something that could scan any kind of code at that point. So once the majority of people seem to have these scanners basically in their pockets, the QR code became something that marketers thought were really great. You do need to have an app. Download an app onto your device, and your device does need to have a camera. So like a e-reader won't work, but anything that you can download an app onto and that has a camera, you can use for scanning a QR code. I give you some examples here. You're going to get this PowerPoint, so you'll have these if you don't already have a QR code runner scanner app. What I will say is you shouldn't ever have to pay money for them, and you shouldn't have to give a lot of any information about yourself when you get one. Some of them, when we talk about how to decide which app to download when there's many to choose from, some folks have pointed out that they're very concerned with. So this is, if you look up for a QR code scanner, you're going to see that there's hundreds of them. And so when I ask how do you decide which one to go with, people have really everyone's come up with their own method for making those decisions. And some people are very concerned about the permissions that you give. So that previous slide included some apps that have very low permissions or no permissions. So if that's an issue for you or your students, that's something to consider. But when I ask people about how they decide which app to go with, they have their own ideas, and I don't know that I have the best idea beyond that, but I will say that I used to think the top one was probably the best, and that's a paid position, so that doesn't mean anything. People talk about going by the number of stars, how many people have downloaded it, obviously price, here are some of the permissions that you might not want to be able to have to give. So those are all things to consider, and you can maybe have you have your idea, but it's a great discussion to have with students because we're all doing it at this point, and some of us have given it a lot more thought than others, and it's actually a great discussion to have to develop a sort of list of what we think might be good things to look out for.
And when to go off site, right? So that if you're looking in a review section, it could be that every single review or quote in there is something that the company put there or paid somebody to put there. And so how do you triangulate information when you're trying to get a sense of how good a product is or how trustworthy a site is?
Absolutely. And so yes, I've often done that where you have to you look for the reviews of QR code scanners and find that these three are the best, but why are they the best? And the more reading you do like that, the more you understand that there are different things to consider that you might not have thought of before. I'm a little sloppy, so I'm not that worried about permissions, and it was great when someone asked me, was there one that had fewer permissions, and I was able to find some, but I wouldn't have found those just by looking in the App Store. I had to go out and look for an article that explained, that gave me some things to look for. So that's all, I think, a really good, again, a good discussion and good practice for everyone, teachers and students alike. So yes, as you're scanning the QR code, it will use your camera, but you're not actually taking a picture of it. And here's a lesson idea that we did in an ESL class. So we had often done a lesson where we would use photos as a photos or an image of any kind as a prompt, and this would have taken place over several weeks, where the photo began. It was the beginning of the lesson, but it came after learning some vocabulary and some other things. So now we're going to use this as a writing prompt and write about what the photo is showing or who these people are. And often in a ESL class, that would have culminated after, writing a draft and correcting that and writing a final version. Then maybe the student would have even presented it in front of the class to everybody. And what we are now doing is adding on another component where we actually can record the student's voice as they read their essay, but then connect that to a QR code. So you can invite people, you could basically create a gallery walk now where the photo would be up on the wall, and beside the photo would be this QR code. And if you scan the QR code, you're going to hear me talking about this photo. So you could have this now around the room or in the hallway. So the original use of QR codes when I started here was to talk about how to get everybody to the same place at the same time. Basically, a QR code just takes the place of a URL, and we're just not very excited about typing in URL. So in this case, if I didn't have the QR code, you could do the same lesson. Everyone would just have to type in a URL. But when you're scanning the QR code, it feels much more magical and somehow interesting, I think. So that's another way that the QR code could be used. The QR code basically is, like I said, just taking the place of a URL, and it's once everyone has the app and the practice down for scanning a QR code, it's a much faster process than having everyone manually typing in the link. So when you're thinking about using QR codes, it shouldn't, sometimes when I do QR codes with folks, and I'll show you at the end here how to actually make your own QR code, people get very excited, and I'm a little afraid they're going to go in and be like, it's Friday, it's QR code day, which you can do, but the idea here would be certainly that the QR code should support whatever your learning goal is. And in this case, it would be getting students to a video, or, so you've already got a lesson where you want people to get to some sort of content on their phone, maybe to take home with them. So you could print out the QR code and give it to them, and they could scan it when they leave your classroom. Or in the classroom, it could be something that's being shown around the room, and they could be using their QR code, their scanners to read those QR codes. So that's the first step. The second step is to make sure that the students have the devices they need, because obviously if they don't have them, then having the QR codes will not have any purpose or good outcome, I guess. And then making sure that wherever you're taking them via the QR code is a mobile-friendly space. So that's why taking them to videos makes sense, or taking them to audio makes sense. If you want them to go to a website, just make sure that the website is something that works well on a small screen. And then to create the QR codes that you need. So again, you're going to get all these resources when you get the PowerPoint, but this is how you make your own QR code. So basically, you need to find the link that you want to share. I use Kwa to make my QR codes. There are other ways to do it too, but if you want to follow this way, you could either just Google Kwa or go to qrcode.kwa.com. You then would paste your link into this box and make sure that it's checked URL. Also, you want to check static. This allows you to have free QR codes. I won't get into the difference between dynamic and static, but static does the job for us. And then you're going to get a little message box where they really want you to go back to using the dynamic one that costs money. And you say, no, I really want to continue with my static one. And then up will come your QR code, and now you can right-click on that and copy and paste it wherever you want. So that's the fast story of QR codes.
So
go ahead and ask any questions. Yeah.
Okay, so before you move on, now, yeah, if people have questions, you can type them in. I think the other point to emphasize here is in terms of sharing links to be able to consume information, I think outside of the classroom, this also opens up new ways of looking at the world, right? Because when you go to museums, when you go to other public places, sometimes there'll be QR codes there that if you scan it, you get more information about the place that you're at. right? So it creates kind of locative data. So like in this place, in this space, there's not that much information, but if I scan this QR code, I do get lots more information about that space. So I think orienting to students to the existence of QR codes and making sure that they can access them gives them options when they're out there. You know, that there's going to be information out there that they can now access because they've got the QR reader.
And there can be really, I mean, one of the biggest uses of QR codes is actually for coupons. So, that can be something that's beneficial. That's even another conversation to have with people
Right,
when coupons are helpful or not.
right,
Certainly, like in Brooklyn, our bus stops have QR codes, and if you scan the QR code, you go to a website, which you could have typed in, but most of us wouldn't have typed in, and then it actually shows you where the bus is on the route. So you get
right.
a kind of a real-time sense of where the bus is, and I've bookmarked that, so now I don't have to scan it every time. I just have it on my phone, and I can check, even when I'm in my home, where the bus is. So yes, I think that's a really good point, that the QR codes are in the world and we're not utilizing them when they could be helpful. There are a lot of garbagey, silly ones that we don't need to necessarily access, but there is some real helpful tools out
Right.
there via QR code.
Right. Okay, I think you can keep going then to
Okay,
creating. So instead of
all right.
consuming, creating.
So we're moving into creating. So right now, I'm guessing in your instruction that you are using quizzes, but it'd be interesting to know if you're doing anything electronically that way. So maybe when you're in the lab, is there a way that you're using quizzes on computers? Or maybe you're even doing something with mobile devices. Or if you wanted to gather information from students, maybe you need to find out if everyone's available to come to an, an extra class on a different day, or getting their contact information or something like that. Um, or even having projects where maybe the students are gathering information from each other and then using that to develop some other part of a project. So let us know how, if you're doing any of these things already, and if you're doing them, how you're doing them. And it doesn't have to be electronically, like maybe you're just having people raise their hands or they fill out something on paper. If you're doing quizzes, if you do use anything on a computer, that would be interesting to know about, but yeah.
Okay, so Jane says that they use conversation grids where students ask for info from classmates.
And is that on
Kind of,
paper? Or she doesn't clarify.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's on paper.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Other ways that people use quizzes or gather information?
So I'll keep moving. We can come back
Okay.
to hear how you've done it as people fill it
Okay.
in. So one of the things that's a really great tool out there, and you might be using it in another way, is Google Forms. So Google obviously has a whole suite of tools, Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, and they're all actually very mobile friendly. So most of us are probably utilizing them on our regular computers if we're using them at all, but they actually do work quite well on small screens. They kind of fit in there. Not something super complex, obviously, but if you want me to add some information into a Google Doc, I could do that from my phone or certainly access it to look at. But Google Forms are super mobile friendly, and they do allow you, they're just a form making tool. So obviously a quiz can be a form or a survey. Both are very obvious ways we use forms. So I do actually have this link here for you. Again, it's not so nice to have to type it all in, but if you don't mind typing it in or scanning that QR code. And this, again, if I was doing this in a class, I would let you know, and I'm going to let you know now. But basically, you're going to a form where you can request to get a digital badge for attending the webinar today. And this is a very simple one. It's just going to ask you for your name and email address so that I can email you your digital badge. But the Google Forms do really give you a lot of functionality. I mean, you can have branching questions. So if I say yes to this one, I go to a different next question. But even just basic information can be grabbed that way, and it all gets fed into a Google spreadsheet. So if you've ever had to take information where people have either filled it out by hand or even on a computer document and send it to you, and then you have to take all that manually and put it into something else, into a spreadsheet or something like that, this will automatically it automates that part. And we've used this in a lot of ways, even having people send us ideas for workshops they want to do through a form, goes into a spreadsheet, and then I can actually do a mail merge back into a document. But for the purposes of what we're talking about right now, as far as mobile content and creating mobile content, if you think of, maybe the homework assignment is to do some reading or to watch a video even, then you could have a Google form link that people go to, and then they have to answer 3 questions or whatever. And all that information will come into your Google Drive into a spreadsheet, and you can really quickly check to see, did everyone get the basic idea? Or students could create the quiz for everybody else to take. That could be their homework, is that they have to create 3 questions to ask about the reading and share that link the next day in class. And then even in class, you could continue the quizzing. So I'm going to continue on. So if we look at Google Forms, so if you tried that out, if you went to that Google form from the last slide, did you have to log in? And the answer is no, you didn't. So one of the things I like about, whenever possible, I don't want to make people have to get new accounts for things. So usually for the creating side, you will have to have an account. But for the consuming side, you don't need to have an account. In this case, that is true. So me creating the form, I would definitely need to have the account. But for you to fill in content, you don't need to have an account. And I can just share a link that is editable and people can put their content in there. So it's just what I said. Okay, so to make a Google form, and the reason why they're a little tricky maybe is that they aren't in the basic menu you see when you go to Google Drive. You see folder, if you go up to new, you see folder, file upload, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, but you have to click more in order to see Google Forms. But then it's right there, and you can bookmark that and get to Google Forms separately, but that's how you get to Google Forms. And the basic outline, it's very simple. You give your form a name, you're going to write in your question. There's several different types of questions. So if you see on the side here, this is a drop-down menu where it says multiple choice. There's a drop-down menu there. You can do paragraph, short answer. You can have a checklist, so you can select more than one possibility. You can actually include images here, so the question could be about images, or if you have low-level students, maybe who don't have high reading skills, or low-level ESL students, you could have an image, and they could have to write words around the image. You could actually even have a video. So you can embed a lot of things in here that they could actually respond directly to. So that's on the creating side. See if it's going to move forward. Right, so here are all the different kinds of questions you can ask. And here are the different things you can add. Lots of resources on how people are using these, Google Forms particularly, but other tools as well. And so we were worried that we're going to run out of time. We actually have a little bit of time, so I can still do my YouTube piece maybe.
Can you go back like
yes.
3 slides maybe into the Google Forms one? Go back another one.
This one?
No, next one.
One more.
Yeah, there you go. So some of the people online, I'm not sure if they know about this, but I'm not sure that I've told you about this, but about a month ago, I started a project under the Angel umbrella where I'm doing a collaborative writing piece. And what I did was I created the first chapter of a story, which was about 4 paragraphs long. And then I had a cliffhanger of an ending. So I left the last sentence kind of, oops, I have to switch my audio. I'm getting audio complaints. Okay. Let me know, is my audio?
That's much better.
Okay. So about a month ago, I started this project where I created this story, and I left the ending open, and then I created a Google form to go with it, and I had about 9 questions attached to the story, so that when you read, and I put it on a blog, so then you read the story, you can put a comment there, which only one person did, but then you can click on a link and go to the Google form dedicated for the story, and there's about 9 questions about the story there, and some of them are literal. So it requires the student to read the story closely. Some of them are interpretive. Why do you think this person did that? And then some of them are open-ended. So what do you think is going to happen next in the story? And then what do you want to happen next? And then what I did was I collected all of that information and used that to craft the second chapter of the story. And so this is going to be an ongoing project where each time I'm going to leave the story open and then ask these generative questions, and then based on the students and the readers' responses, craft the next chapter of the story. And so Google Forms has been perfect for that because it allows me to ask both short answer questions and then also multiple choice questions. And for the multiple choice questions, it gives you a pie chart. When you look at all of the responses, where it says questions there, that's you answering the questions. But when you fill out the survey, once you submit your responses, you can see, if it's enabled, you can see other people's responses. So in this case, I allowed that so people can see what other people answered to those questions. And then you can also see a pie chart on the multiple choice questions about how things are breaking down. So it gives you the opportunity to collect that information, but then the students can see the answers that other people gave. So it's a really, really, I think, elegant way of connecting work that you're doing in one place with the ability to give people an opportunity to talk about it in another place.
That's a really beautiful example. I think one of the things that there are several settings. You can have it set up so that people can't see anything about anyone else's answers and they can only answer one time. You can have it as Eric was saying, where people can see other people's answers and also give people opportunities to take the same quiz multiple times. And I was just making me think about, sort of pre-thinking. So one of the things about video, people like video a lot, but there's been a little bit of a question mark whether you actually learn a lot from videos when it's sort of a passive experience. So when I was in junior high, I feel like every book we read was chosen because it had a film, and that was sort of the dessert. Like you read the book, and now we spent 3 days sort of in a dark room watching part of the movie, but it was all very passive. Even if you had a worksheet, it didn't seem like it was that powerful of a learning experience. And one idea to help that with video is to do some pre-thinking and talking before you watch the video, so people kind of have already created those spaces in their brain to look for the important information. And I think maybe even, to me, a Google form could be used that way, where maybe people take the look at the questions beforehand and answer them, and then watch the video, and then maybe take it again and see if any of their ideas have changed, or at least have a space for that. So those are all really interesting ways, I think, to use the Google Forms. They can be embedded. So I do a whole other, in fact, I'll be doing a workshop here on the 30th, maybe the 30th, I think, on building a Weebly website. And one of the things about a Weebly website, it's a website, but the idea is then there's one location, one URL that students need to know, but I can update that anytime and keep adding new content. So maybe every Thursday they know that I'm going to put up a new video or a new question or something that they need to go look at, and then they can respond to it. And I could actually embed the Google form in the website, so you can just answer right there on the actual screen rather than having to click on a link and go somewhere else. So it's a very powerful tool, I think.
So I encourage people in New Jersey that haven't gone to the website yet to do, and I think maybe now I'll send out the link more generally so people can.
Yes.
It's only the second chapter of the story, so now's the time to get in.
So we're getting in, right?
The story's getting twisted already. So
yeah,
it's kind of a mystery story. All right, so I think if you want to move forward to thinking about curating information, I think we do have time to cover that.
Okay, so we'll do a little bit on that one. So with curating, I focused here on videos because I think video really lends itself to a small screen. I think at first people were sort of like, really? People watch a video? But if you watch a video on your phone, especially if you have headphones plugged in, I mean, it's a very intense experience. I'm actually much more when I watch something on my phone or on my iPad, I tend to pay much more attention to it than I do when I watch it on television, because on television I tend to do 10 other things. And I think the combination of having the sound going kind of right into my ear and the image being right there in my hands has been very powerful. And especially if you have, I mean, again, some teachers tell me that they're, maybe YouTube is blocked in their classrooms. I know someone mentioned earlier that they weren't allowed to use mobile devices, so that's the other challenge. But if you find that you are not able to get to YouTube in your classes, helping your students get to those videos via their mobile devices is a workaround. So if you use videos now, well, the question is, do you use video now? And it sounded like earlier, I know some people mentioned YouTube, but it might be other, it doesn't have to be YouTube. There are lots of other places where there are videos available. But how do you use the video? How is that something that you send them a specific link to a specific video, or are they searching for videos around a certain topic? And again, how do you get them there? We looked at that QR code, the very beginning of the QR code section was kind of looking at that too, but is it the same ways that you were describing before, that you send emails or they're already up on the website, or if you would answer those?
Renee
Yes.
says in class in conjunction with a lesson. So
Okay.
particular topic, then the video will be shown alongside that, I think.
Well, I'm going to keep moving on, but if you have ways that you use video, do feel free to let us know, because it's interesting to hear how people are using it. So with what I was looking at this time was using, one of the things about YouTube is that there are so many videos there that people could certainly go there and watch a video on a topic, and it might not be the best version or not something that really connects with what you are particularly covering in class. Maybe it's too long, maybe the audio is bad, anyway, whatever things are out there. So one of the ideas around one of the tools that YouTube gives you is the ability to make a playlist. So if you have a Google account, you actually already have a YouTube account. You may or may not have ever logged into YouTube, but you can log in with a Google account to YouTube. And once you're in YouTube, logged into YouTube, you have the ability to create any playlist you want, meaning you create a name for your playlist, and then you can save anyone else's videos or your own videos into that playlist. So often by topic, right? You might have a playlist by topic of math, or it could get much more specific. It could be on algebra, and this other playlist could be specifically on triangles or something like that. So you can get as specific as you want to. So students can do this for themselves, but you as a teacher certainly could create playlists and then send the link out to your students. And so by getting one link, they now get access to this whole playlist, and the playlist can play all the way through, or they can just go to individual videos. But you've kind of created, in this idea of curation, right? You've taken from this big world of YouTube and made this nice little solid set of recommended videos that you think are particularly useful for your students. And like I said, students can do that for themselves or for each other as well. And then sharing one link gets you to all of that. So the example here is if you were to type in either the long link or the short link and the QR code. And notice that with my shortened links, when I put in words, I try to put in words that kind of give you a sense. So I don't know if you're guessing here, but this will take you to a video that talks about Fermat's last theorem and how often it shows up in The Simpsons, and how The Simpsons episodes seem to even find solutions to Fermat's theorem that really shouldn't be possible. So there's a discussion. So some questions you might ask before you watch the video is, what is Fermat's last theorem? How many people who are on the staff of The Simpsons have math backgrounds? And what is one near-miss solution to Fermat's last theorem? Again, this content might not have anything to do with anything that you would ever do with students, but it actually seemed rather interesting to me. And it is that kind of like real, math and real world and fun stuff kind of combination that I think starts to make the juices run a little bit.
I think some of the people weighed in saying how they use video. So Renee said that they usually follow up a video with questions answered in groups. And I think that's a common thing. And I think the idea of a playlist is actually really nice to fit with that. So that, here's the first video you watch, and then in the playlist, here's the next video you watch. And the questions may be, oh, how does the perspective change if it's about the same topic from one video to the next, right? So the playlist feature allows you to kind of have the students keep going through this activity and ask questions that are connected to each other. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Jane says that they use video on computer, not so much with mobile devices, but she has personally used it, YouTube, to find out how to do something practical. And I think that's also something that we can think about if our students are doing that, looking at video to do something practical, when they come in to be able to share it. And then you could also collect them and make a class playlist where people have noticed, oh, this video was particularly helpful in thinking about how to clean my air conditioner. This was particularly useful in how to make ceviche or whatever it might be, right? And so they can curate as a group and not just individually.
And I think that that can be, those kinds of videos too, to me are really interesting because if you watch them, then, I mean, I don't know if you've ever done lessons in your class where you actually ask students to write, you know, directions on how to do something, which, but when I was teaching ESL, that was not an uncommon exercise. But to then turn that into a video where the students actually make a video and you could post that to YouTube either in a private way or in a public way, and make that into a playlist that then could be used with other students. So I think there's some really, the playlist is just a very helpful tool. You have a channel, which is not something that you get to really, that's all the videos that you've made yourself, but the playlist is completely open to you. And you can also take, you know, find other people's playlists and save those. So you don't have to be the only creator of the playlist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Students could share their own playlists with each other.
They could share them. When you create the playlist, you can be very mindful of the order. So that could be something that you want to be very specific about. So the watch them in order 1 through 7 or whatever, or they could just be a collection, and students could go in and pick, you know, around, but not have to watch them in order. So you have both of those options.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of people using YouTube. So I call it playlist, and playlist is still the term inside YouTube, but they also do sometimes call it library. And when you're looking to find your list of playlists, it's actually going to be under library. So just know that the terminology seems to be kind of fluctuating a little bit, but both terms are being used. And just so you know, library is the list of all your playlists. You by default have playlists. I think it's like watch later or favorites. So if you ever make something into a favorite when you're watching a YouTube video, that's going to be in your favorites. So this was an example. If I find a video that I like and I want to add it to a playlist, I go down here to this little plus sign, and when I click on that, I'm going to get a list of playlists, and if it's not one of those, I can make a new one. So here's a list of all my playlists, and I can decide which one I want it to go into, or I can create a new one. And then I can share the link to my playlist. So that can be sometimes a little confusing too, but you just have to click on that share. When you're in the list of all, this is the playlist name. If I click share, I'm going to get these, I can share it using any of these tools, and I also have this link down here, and the link is what I want to share with folks. You can actually have a collaborative playlist, so you can invite other people to actually share right into the playlist versus everyone making their own playlist and then sharing the links to those. So you could have a class playlist that everyone has helped to put in. Your homework is to find one video and add it to the playlist, for example, and then the next day explain why you chose that video or show it and talk about it with your classmates. So there's lots of other stuff on YouTube in general around education. There are, yeah, there's even, I mean, there's YouTube for education. There's definitely other tools out there for video, things like TeacherTube or Vimeo or a lot of like National Geographic and Discovery Channel. They'll all have a lot of video. They just don't have this nice playlist component yet. But I think, so I think it can be, the reason I concentrate on YouTube is because there's a lot of content there, and some of it's really garbagey, and it's really helpful to have a teacher or students helping to curate the content there to make it something that they can help each other find the good stuff.
Right, and as you were saying earlier, just having that conversation is great in an ESL class, right? So how do we evaluate an evaluation of a QR reader, and then how do we evaluate a video? How do we evaluate a playlist, right? These are all the kind of critical thinking conversations that we want going on in the classroom that are exactly what our students should be doing when they're working on ESL or their writing or their reading skills.
And I think these are all tools also that you can, they have a very clear use in an instructional situation, but they are all things that everyone can use outside of that. And so you're developing skills that will go with you. And they're not kind of just purely for the instruction moment. They really
Right.
are skills that will go with you.
Right. So we are at the top of the hour. We now managed to very, I think, gracefully go through all the slides that she had. So if you have any last questions before we sign off, Thomas had asked about whether QR codes can be printed.
They can. So when you get that QR code on the Kaiwa screen, you right click on it, and then what I usually do is I say copy image, and then I paste it wherever I want to paste it. So often I'm pasting it into a PowerPoint, or I can paste it into a Word document. Another rule for me is I always put the link. So the QR code is very hard to, if folks don't have a QR code reader, there's nothing they can do. So if I put the link there, I feel like you have both options.
Mm-hmm.
I also shorten my links before I make the QR code, which is an extra step, but it means first that it often makes a slightly cleaner QR code. You'll notice that some QR codes have very small, the black and white pieces are much smaller, kind of finer grain. That can lead to errors in scanning. So the bigger, chunkier black places are better, and doing a shorter link helps you get that. But that's really a next step. That's not at all required. So the main thing is have your link, go to Kaiwa, make your QR code, right click on it, copy it, and paste it wherever you want to, and then you certainly can print it out. Or have many of them on the page. They could be the answers to math questions or a scavenger hunt. If you go to some of the resources there, you'll see people have done really interesting things with QR codes. Made a dice, which each side is a different QR code.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So, as I said earlier, we'll be sending out the certificate, and then also in the email we'll have links to the things that you all shared in terms of ideas for sites, and now we'll also pass along links to things that she wants to make sure that you're aware of. And then this will be curated on NGEL's YouTube channel.
Beautiful.